True crime dates back to the 18th century, but didn't become really popular until the 1980s. It was first seen as a book about 6 decades worth of murder trials that a Scottish lawyer, William Ruffhead, attended. This was the first time true crime stories had been made, and he is considered to be the head of true crime. True crime is mostly about murder trials, and a little other half of them are about serial killers. It comes in many forms, such as books, articles, films, podcasts, and television shows. Some are about famous crimes such as the O.J. Simpson murder case, and many more. True crime is a term used to reference non-fictional accounts of real crimes, mostly murders. The rise in media coverage of crimes will lead to an increase in demand for these non-fictional stories of crimes.
Have you ever seen Evil Genius? What do you really think happened to JonBenet Ramsey? These are all universal water cooler conversation starters, or at least they were at some point in time. Point is, there's just something about true crime stories that we love. Do we all secretly just want to be detectives? Well, according to psychologists, yeah, we kind of do. Books, film, TV, even art appeals to our universal sense of human nature. According to a report by the Huffington Post, psychologists say that in watching stories, we can explore a part of our personality that we might not openly embrace.
I've never seen a case that took so many turns in so many different directions, and really it was bizarre.
Don't worry.
True crime is essentially a film genre that evaluates the stories of actual crimes and can also be about the criminal's life story which leads up to the crimes. True crime is a genre of visual stories and writings. The stories explicitly describe the actions of the criminal and what the investigators thought or knew why the criminal committed the crimes. These stories can be very intense and violent depending on the crime being described. Many of these stories tell the child experiences the environment the criminal grew up in to help the viewer or reader understand why the criminal committed these crimes and make it more interesting. In a true crime article about the unsolved disappearance of Linda Sherman, it starts with the basic information of when and where Linda was born. This could help the reader see that this is a normal town and that even in this normal town a terrible crime can happen. Then, the article goes on to talk about how she met her husband, Donald Sherman, in high school, and later on they got married at a young age, which gave some insight on the personality of these two. It goes on to talk about marriage issues and important events leading up to threats that Donald made to Linda about killing her and their kid, Den himself. Naming the important events and descriptively saying what happened in them helps lead up to the crime and what makes the criminal snap to murder someone or murder multiple people. In Linda's story, she eventually disappeared the next day after fighting with Donald the night before. No one suspected it was a murder until a skull was found at a bar Donald goes to often. This led to the investigation of Linda's murder. After many times of the case going cold, finding a new lead, it eventually died out and was never solved. This article is a good example of how true crimes are usually structured and told to give in-depth descriptions of the events leading up to a murder to help a reader or viewer learn the personalities and why they did a crime. In Linda's case, her death was never solved and left a mystery, but not all true crime stories are like this. Some end up with the criminal finally being caught. True crime stories can be told from many different perspectives. As in the one summarized above, the story was focused on the victim because there was no criminal caught, even though it was obvious who it could have been. But most true crime stories are focused on the criminal and their actions, unless the criminal remains a mystery. What makes these true crime stories so entertaining to people is the arrival of significant tabloid television and the desensitizing of violence, and the rise in media coverage of crimes is what led to the increase in demand for true crime stories. Recently, with many new TV shows coming out about true crime, they have been a big hit. The demand has increased a lot lately due to more publicity and exposure to murders. Why people are drawn to these crimes is complex. People like these stories because it gives someone who is watching or viewing true crime an adrenaline rush, which is addictive to the human brain, which is why many people are fascinated by the nature of these crimes. Also, it is like when you're driving by a car wreck and you just can't look away, but you know it is bad. Same thing goes for true crime. It's horrible, but you just can't look away because it's sensational in a vulgar way. Not only does the person viewing or reading these true crime stories get an adrenaline rush, but fear plays a factor in why people like watching true crime. True crime allows people to experience fear in a controlled environment. People like this because the danger is exciting but not for real, so it creates a desire to keep watching. Also, with the news and the rise of visual media. It helps people know about murders and mass killings, and this creates the desire to people to want to acquire knowledge of these murders. I remember watching a show called Copycat, and it was about criminals who mimicked murders in movies and TV shows. More specifically, I remember an episode where this guy mimicked the show Dexter, where he would lure people in his garage and kill them, then dismember their body for pleasure. I was disgusted at what this guy thought about when dismembering a dead person's body, but I couldn't stop watching the show. At the time, I didn't know why I was so interested in the show. TV shows like this one have the same basic structure like true crime articles, but TV or shows or movies are a bit more different than articles because they contain actual interviews of investigators of the crime. Also, they show real questioning of the criminal, showing how they act and deceive along with reenactments of the crimes and events leading up to the crime or crimes. True crime can be considered a guilty pleasure for people who watch it because they know it is bad, but they just can't stop watching or reading true crime.
Today's age, with social media, people meet people online. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but you definitely have to take more precautions. Everybody can lie on the internet. But when you start meeting someone in person after meeting them on social dating sites and that, you have to pay attention to what your senses are telling you. Almost every single day, we hear somebody's got lured in, been sexually assaulted, something's gone on.